first all the questions.
I think we will forget all the questions if we have all the questions, if you don't mind. As I explained, and again, we could be here for a long, long time, but I explained that for me the worst scenarios are exactly the non-Europeans, because the help is not there in an easy way. And it's very dramatic for us because we have lawyers that work with us, Dutch lawyers, so I help the Dutch lawyers as much as I can. Even the strategy time, we help them with documentation. So, because normally they have the support of the state, they are not so well paid. So these cases don't have the necessary effort from the professionals. So we try to push as much as we can and help them as well. But I don't get so upset with informations like the ones you just got your nerves. For me, that goes in the warrior mode and what I call legal strategy. If I can wait and I can have her safe and the children are safe, the mechanism, the legal mechanism of divorce can come later. And every case has a case, and it's also about sustainability and the fact that every person wants a reaction, and we need to provide them a reaction, and sometimes we need to be resourceful in the way we do it. So, and I totally agree with you, and it's also why Arise started, because we understood there was no voice for the non-Dutch, and especially the non-European. The victim itself is from the Philippines.
Yeah.
Jimmy. So she understood that very much on her own. And it's not perfect, but we need more voices and more institutions that knock on the doors of the legislature, because understand, they are not voters. But I'm also not a voter. You know? And so our voices have less value. But we need to keep pushing. We need to have friends, and we need Dutch. They need to come on board with us. So this is, yeah, so much to do.
I don't even know if that was a question, but I think I see your point that ethical considerations is really just to point out that if you want to do research on gender-based violence, if you want to do research on gender-based violence, you just can't go and do any type of research. Because I think in the past, what they usually did was they do a household survey. So there's how many people are in your house, blah, blah, blah. And then in the same survey, they would ask questions like, have you ever experienced domestic violence? Were you ever beaten by your husband? And sometimes it's in a situation where you know, the husband is there, the mother-in-law is there. So they have all these ethical considerations, like you have to ensure safety, which is the most important. And then the other thing I remembered, there was one case I was looking at, and it was actually in Somalia. So they just came out of conflict, and there was a lot of conflict-related gender-based violence. And then they interviewed a 9-year-old girl, and then they mentioned all the details, like comes from this village, was assisted by this social worker, but they said they didn't mention the name. But obviously you can tell, you know, who that person is. And they didn't have consent forms. This is a child, and you know, no explanation to the parents, etc. So now we are saying, like, you know, you can do research, which is okay, but you have to tick those boxes. And some of these victims are still at a stage where they need like counseling or medical support. You just can't go in there and, like, you know, I want to go to a shelter, I want to visit it and see everybody there and interview them. So there are guidelines now that are in place. They're fairly new compared to other research guidelines, but they have to be there. And there's a lot of issues that actually needs to be researched on. Even domestic violence, it's not, we don't have enough information or data. You know, sexual harassment is like new, we're just getting new data. But for most of you, actually that was my thesis when I was in the Philippines. So that law was, I think, 1990 something, early 1990s. That was my thesis, and at the time there was no data. And until now, you know, as you've said, you know, sometimes you feel defeated because the law's been there for so long, but there's still no data or information.
enough information or data. So we get a little bit here and there, but I think it's important to consider ethical considerations whenever we do the research. But yeah.
I think your question was a direct result of my having framed my presentation in a very legal manner, so I get a really difficult bar question from you. So I feel like I'm sitting for the bar again and trying to understand this whole international thing. Anyway, so I think that in bilateral agreements, it always operates on two levels. First is the very legalistic, formalistic. It has to comply with the constitution, international standards, etc. But it also operates on a very political level. And so that is where the battle usually is. And I would say that your question manifests the imbalance between sending and receiving states. Because for us, it's usually, yes, of course, we want to make sure that our constitutional tenets are always upheld in any agreement that the Philippines enters into. But again, what can we give and take a little bit that will allow us to still send Filipinos, but make sure that when they're there, they're protected. So it's a very tricky, like it's something, I think your question is something that a lawyer cannot answer. As a lawyer, I would say, follow the law. But I think, yeah, I mean, I would say that if I were a lawyer answering the question, I would say I will not agree to an agreement which will require me to bend my own constitutional provisions. But I don't think that that's the only level where these agreements will operate from. So diplomacy is a job I will not be able to do because you have to navigate between what you're willing and able to give. I mean, what is your maximum threshold, which will allow you to still give them that opportunity, but make sure that when they're there, they're still protected. So I think that's a question that's better answered by a diplomat. Thank you.